everything right now. Y'all are so nice. So welcome everyone. My name is Janice Lee. I'm the Advocacy Director of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. I want to give it and that is a hat I'm wearing tonight. I just want to say thank you so much. There's obviously an overwhelming amount of interest in the room. There's so overwhelming interest that there are not enough seats for a number of people here. So if you are able-bodied, please, I really encourage you to give up your seat for a senior or person with disability, or really anyone who comes up to you and asks. So if there's a seat next to you, there looks like there's a couple more here. Please do give up your seat. And I apologize for not having enough seats in the room. Yeah, there's another one here. So, you know, if you see someone raising their hand and you'd really like a seat, thank you so much. So, let me see. So, as I mentioned, my name is Janice. I'm the Advocacy Director. So, I am full-time staff at the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, and my role in the endorsements process is I facilitate it. I do not have a vote in the deliberation. I do not participate in that. You're going to hear from our board president in just a minute about those roles, but I just want to be clear in that. So who here knows about the go for it. Okay. Who here is a member of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition? Yay! Woo! All right. Thank you so much for being a member of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. We are a membership-based, member-driven organization with a mission of promoting the bicycle for everyday transportation. You see a lot of changes in the city in trying to push our city to be safer, more welcome, and more beautiful for biking across the city, and we know District 5 is one of the biggest places for biking. So we are powered by our over 10,000 members, so if you are not a member, I saw a lot of you didn't raise your hands. Don't worry, we have Charles here, who can sign you up as a member. Right here, right now, it's $35 a year. You've got a team of people who are really cute and really awesome like us, supporting bike infrastructure and fighting for you all day long. And also, Charles will be the one roaming if you have any questions. He's going to be combining some of the questions together so that when we get to the audience Q&A portion, hopefully as many questions as we can get are, come on in, Gail, are represented in the audience Q&A. The other person I want to give a shout out to is Kristen Leckie, our community organizer. Two things. Please don't bother them. They are going to be actually recording this event because everyone has really bad cell reception in the Haight for whatever reason. We unfortunately can't live stream it, but we were going to upload it to YouTube like within a day. So if you're like, I don't know what's happening, or you're like, oh my gosh, I want to tell a friend about this amazing candidate forum I went to and this amazing organization, the SF Bicycle Coalition, don't worry, we have the YouTube video afterwards. I also want to give a shout out to the rest of staff who are here, including Brian Wiedenmeyer, the Executive Director of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. I'm going to give him a hand. Great. So this event was also made possible by our wonderful partners in street advocacy, including SF Transit Riders, Our Bikes, and Walk San Francisco. Unfortunately, Rachel Hayden from SF Transit Riders is delayed because of Muni. So that happened. The other, and Brad is here from Our Bikes. Our Bikes is a really community-driven grassroots group that has been working on getting more accessible, affordable bike share in San Francisco and Bay Area. So if you want to learn more, where's Brad? Raise your hand, Brad.
I think Brad may have actually been.
Oh, he wasn't feeling well, but check them out. And Marta, do you want to say like a word about Walk SF?
Sure. I'm with Walk San Francisco. My name's Marta Lindsay, and we work to make the streets safe for everyone who walks, which is everyone, including everyone in this room. I live in District 5 myself and know firsthand how we've got some things that need to change in terms of making our streets safe for everyone of every age and ability. So if you're not a member yet, you should join us to get involved in this really, really important work. So I'm excited to hear more and excited to help.
Great. So these are 3 amazing organizations. So please check them out. And I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand it over to Jean Kao, who is the president of the SF Bicycle Coalition member-elected board.
For the camera, Jean. Oh my gosh. So I'm Jean Kao. I'm the president of the board for the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. I want to thank you all for being here today and being so engaged in local politics and local races. I wrote some stuff down so I wouldn't forget, so forgive me if I look like I'm reading, because I am. So we've been making endorsements in local races for over 20 years. So we put the power of our 10,000 plus members to work to help pass ballot measures and elect people who help us advance our mission of promoting the bicycle for everyday transportation. In our current strategic plan that we developed in partnership with our members, we specifically called out this following goal: build public support and political power to win affordable and sustainable transportation for all San Franciscans. A specific objective under that goal is to elect powerful champions for biking. For this November election, our board will be considering endorsements for all local ballot measures and for mayor, district attorney, and District 5 supervisor. Our endorsements process has just begun. In August, we'll be posting all candidate questionnaires we've received and then polling our members. After that, the board will go through a lengthy discussion and deliberation to confirm the final slate of endorsements. And traditionally, we've made this slate public in early September. So there are a lot of different ways that you can engage with us in this process. Attending events such as this, reading the candidate questionnaires, voting in our member polling, or by writing to the board or attending monthly meetings. Our next board meeting will be next Tuesday, July 23rd. You can stay up to date by reading our weekly email newsletter as we continue communicating out frequently and regularly our endorsements as our endorsements process moves forward. Okay, so that's it. I'm honored to introduce our moderator tonight, Margaret McCarthy. She's a District 5 resident, by coalition member, and former staff, including as executive director. So, Margaret.
Thanks so much, Jean. Hi, thank you. Welcome to everybody who is here today. We are thrilled by this turnout. I know that we did our best to arrange the chairs so that people can see as best as possible, but also there are 4 poles in this room. So do whatever you need to do to be comfortable, respectful of your neighbors, and able to see and hear. You may have noticed that no one has been using a microphone so far. That's because we have limited AV in this space. So our panel will not have a microphone this evening. We really want to make sure that everybody who's in this room and all the folks who are going to be watching the video later are able to hear. So I personally love and celebrate engaged participation in democracy. I'm just going to ask people to do it at a low volume tonight, okay? A few other things to say in terms of housekeeping. There are 2 gender-neutral single-stall handicapped accessible bathrooms around the corner that way. Please take care of yourself. And there are also 2 emergency exits. One's the way that you came in, and one, surprisingly, is behind me. Great, now you know. And then as a Bicycle Coalition is hosting this event, obviously we care a lot about the environment and the planet. We also know simultaneously that there are 4 disposable plastic water bottles on these tables. We are sorry. We ran into a logistical water emergency, and we ultimately decided that we wanted to make sure none of our candidates suffered from dehydration while talking to you about their positions. So that's the tough call we had to make. Thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. So overall, I'm going to try to really keep us to time to make sure that everybody on the panel has a chance to speak and respond to the questions. Some questions have been prepared in advance, and we're also saving time towards the second half to get those questions from the audience. So a reminder to anybody who doesn't know or maybe arrived late, there are index cards where you as an audience member here tonight can fill out a question you would like the panel to answer. Again, you need to turn those into Charles, wherever Charles is. Charles is still right there, right? So please, at any point, you can give Charles your questions. He will collect them later. And I think with that, before we introduce our panel, who you are all here to see today, I want to take a moment for you, the audience, to introduce yourselves to our panel so we can get a quick sense of who's in the room. So we already found out who's a member of the Bicycle Coalition, but please raise your hand if you live in District 5. Fantastic, hands down. Please raise your hand if you are an undecided voter. Amazing, thank you so much. All right, so for the next, I'm not counting, this is for you, not for me. For the next 90 seconds, and I'm gonna be strict on this, I want you to take a moment, I want you to turn to your neighbor, especially if it's someone you don't know, introduce yourself and ask them what they're hoping to learn from tonight's event. 90 seconds, go.
I'm your neighbor.
But now, finally, at last, it is time to hear from our esteemed panel of candidates. So each candidate is going to have 4 minutes to introduce themselves to you. I'm not going to introduce them. I am going to make sure we keep to time. We're going to hear from our candidates in the following order for this round. First, Vallie, Ryan, Nomvula, and Dean. So, Vallie.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the Bicycle Coalition for sponsoring this and also for partnering the Walk SF, Our Bikes, and the SF Transit Riders. You know, as a neighborhood activist years ago, and then legislative aide, and then now as a supervisor this first year, I have actually really prioritized safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. It's really one of my #1 priorities. You know, when you think of a bike and pedestrian friendly street, you also really think of a street that's vibrant. We see it all over the city, that if it's safe for bikes and pedestrians, it's a vibrant street. But tragically, we see time and time again that we're not doing a good job, especially when right now it feels like a life and death matter on the streets. And I'm a frequent bike and Muni rider, and yes, those are my crutches behind me, and it was a bike accident, but it was my fault. I had my bike in high gear, trying to push through a light, and when I realized I wasn't gonna make the light and make it a fast stop, my leg went down, everybody knows that. So, I remember back when I lived south of Market and I was an artist. In the late 80s and 90s, we used to ride on the sidewalks, wide sidewalks. We'd be riding on the sidewalks because in the daytime you would have trucks and delivery vans coming through, and at night it was bars. The safest place was on sidewalks. And things have changed. When I was a neighborhood activist in Lower Hay, I was there when people started talking about the wiggle. The wiggle, it was amazing. Then I went in as legislative aide, and we started talking about making the wiggle better, putting in green bike boxes, and making Fell a protected bike lane. That was huge. But to do that, we also had to work with the ARCO station, if anybody remembers that time, when we said, okay, we have to queue up the cars, and then we asked ARCO to have extra long hoses on their gas lines, so they would actually, cars wouldn't come in and out and you know, make it unsafe for bikes. We also had to, I was a legislative aide going down and making sure Masonic was safe. I was involved in that. Complete involvement, and then I cut the ribbon on Masonic. Does Masonic need more work? Absolutely. We need protected bike lanes on Masonic. You know, going street by street, block by block is very important to me to make the street safer in District 5, but we also have to look at citywide, because you just don't ride around in your neighborhood. We absolutely have to have the 20 miles protected bike lanes, and they need to come faster, and I'm pushing for that. Fundamentally, this city is designed for cars, and we have to change that mentality. We have to reverse it, because no one has a chance when you're a pedestrian or you're on a bike against a 2,000 plus car. This has to be changed. For me, I've been an activist, I was a legislative aide, and now as your supervisor. There's priorities for me like homeless and housing, but transit too. And transit, I was the one that went and pushed MTA to actually, when we had the hearing, to say the transit riders, and also helping along with it, the Muni drivers were not making enough money. They didn't even make enough money to actually live in the city, where they had to drive in. What sense is that? They finally, because of my pushing and others, have a contract that they can actually make the kind of money that they could live in the city. These are my goals. We have to work together to be able to have safe streets for bicycles, pedestrians, and make sure transit works. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vallie. Next, we're going to hear from Ryan. Take it away.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brian, candidate for District 5 Supervisor. Transit and safety. Safety is one of my most important top priorities if I'm a supervisor. It's the first thing you see on my website, cleanliness and safety. So that's why I proposed the most intense infrastructure improvement plan and program for the city. It's using new and creative ways, such as left bike lanes, many options for different kinds of streets, using creative ways to keep our streets safe. Give me a second. Sorry. I need to go pee.
I think in that case, let's come back to Ryan. Yeah, take your time. That's okay. Because we are quite tight on time this evening. So let's all just be kind to our human bodies. We'll give Ryan his time when he comes back. But I'm going to ask us to refocus. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
That's right.
So now we're going to hear next from Nomvula.
Hi, I'm Nomvula O'Meara, and I'm running for candidate for District 5. I live in the Lower Haight, and I'm actually really glad that SFBC Coalition, who I'm not a member of, but I intend to be, is actually hosting this event today. Of course, I went through your website and I saw the matters that you're concerned with, which I fully embrace, especially in dealing with public safety. I also read comparative examples, for instance, in Amsterdam, because I have my mother and brother that live there. So it's a bike city, as you know, actually the rest of the Netherlands. And I thought that we could learn from examples of them. As you know, living in San Francisco, I'm not sure what the statistics are, but a lot of bikes get stolen. There's no effective policing for that. So one of the examples that I read, that The Guardian actually, which is a UK newspaper, I read an article and said they, for instance, in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam alone you have it's a population of 880,000 people. Of 10% of bikes get stolen there, which is about 80,000. So what they do is they work together with the police, because what's been happening is a lot of bikes were being stolen and being imported across Europe, mostly to Belgium, etc. So we could learn from examples, because this is a new biking city, to learn what other biking cities are doing to improve public safety, to improve the anti-theft that goes on. So when I'm supervisor, how will I tackle the problem of safety? Well, I think being able to consult with the necessary organizations, apart from just SF Bikers Coalition, in terms of the community at large, members of District 5, how is that affecting them? I think creates a groundswell and is more democratic in terms of effectively making change, because I think that's effectively the best way to make change. And then lastly, we can talk more about those. There's other issues, of course, I want to tackle, which we have discussed before. In terms of how I see myself, apart from just running for this race, I'm a mother of 3, and 2, let's see, my oldest graduated in computer science and pre-law from Oberlin College. My 19-year-old goes to Fusion Academy, and the youngest goes to French American. I'm a single parent. I've been a single mom for a while. I've had the experience of homelessness. I also have a bachelor's in creative writing, English literature, and pursued my master's in motion picture and television, which is a field I worked in back in South Africa in television and film, and I constantly am working as a film producer and as a filmmaker here, which helps to enlighten me about changes or what's really going on in the city of San Francisco. That's all I have to say for now.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, great. So we've got, we're going to bring it back to Ryan. So welcome back, Ryan.
Woo, Ryan.
We're glad to hear from you.
Sorry about that. I have a cut from skating. So
We're all beat up.
So yeah. So again, Ryan, candidate for District 5 Supervisor. I do want to thank the Bicycle Coalition, Walk SF, and what is it? Yeah, SF Transit Riders and Janice Lee for not only inviting me, but also the amazing accomplishments you guys made throughout San Francisco for commuters. So, first things first, again, safety is one of my top priorities again, and that includes the safety of pedestrians, all commuters on and off the road. I'm blanking out here, but you know what? Hey, Jean, would you like to go first? I'm going to take care of my
I would say if there's
quick.
anything else you want to say about your bio, this is a great time.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't have to just be about transit.
So, I immigrated to the Bay Area in 2003, and I'm proudly educated here. I started out as a tutor for high school students. I made my way up to being a political journalist for a news network. And then last year I campaigned for many House of Representative candidates. And that's my professional background. When it comes to transit, I'm gonna get back to that, I was an active biker for a great portion of my life. I love the community, the culture, and even just the breeze sometimes. And it was until someone decided to break my lock and take my bike. So if anybody in the audience happens to have a white BMX bike, I'm still missing her. But I'm the most forgiving person. Okay. So anyways, I have policies expanding on all issues in District 5, but most importantly, the safety of bikers and commuters is always my #1 priority, and that's why I have the most intensive infrastructure improvement program, which again uses new and creative methods to improving road safety, traffic flow, and even helping the environmental sustainability. Because I truly believe that if you are a law-abiding pedestrian, cyclist, or even a driver, your safety shouldn't be something that you are consistently worrying about. It should be provided to you. So that's my take on safety.
Alright, so, and our final introduction for this round, I'm turning it over to Dean.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Dean Preston and really appreciate you all being here this evening, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk about transit. I am a Bike Coalition member of Walk SF. I was a founding donor of the SF Transit Riders, then called Union. And I've been an everyday Muni rider for the last 26 years, and my apologies, that's why I was late arriving. So, you know, right now on many issues, the status quo in City Hall is just not working. We are the least affordable city in the entire country. We have staggering inequality. Half the African American population of our city has been displaced. Storefronts and homes are sitting empty while we have thousands of people on our streets. And the city's more congested than ever with Uber and Lyft, virtually unregulated, failing public transit system, and rising pedestrian and bike injuries and fatalities. So I believe that we can and must do better. You know, like most of you in this room, I'm an advocate, not a City Hall insider. My background, I'm a civil rights and tenant rights attorney. I founded California's only statewide tenant rights organization, which helped lead the fight to save rent control when it was under attack. I co-founded Affordable Diviz, a community group that forced City Hall to require more affordable housing from developers. I'm a former small business owner. I'm a public school parent. And I've been in District 5 as my home for 2 decades. And for those 20 years, I have been on the front lines fighting for tenants, fighting for neighbors, and working people. I believe that now is the time for us to take bigger, bolder, and more courageous steps. I'm really inspired by new leaders like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like her, I'm a democratic socialist and proud of it. And I believe every person deserves health care, affordable home, a fair wage, and equal access to power. I've spent my entire professional life putting forward big ideas and then doing the work to make them happen. So I wrote and passed Proposition F last year, which gives every tenant in San Francisco who faces eviction a right to an attorney. I was an early backer of Prop C, which taxes the biggest corporations to tackle homelessness. I championed an eviction protection ordinance to stop teacher evictions during the school year, and it's the only law of its kind in the nation. And every time we put these kind of ideas forward, we are told they are impossible until we do them. And my campaign is about taking bold steps, and some might call those steps radical, to address our problems. So a Green New Deal, fundamental criminal justice reform, a public bank to reinvest in our community, and social housing to reverse displacement. And here in the district, we need to save Midtown. I see some Midtown folks. Find a permanent space here in the Hague for the Homeless Youth Alliance, stand up to evictions of our neighbors, and build affordable housing, not just luxury condos. And on transit specifically, we need a supervisor who will not only tirelessly advocate to address local hotspots and safety, but also stand up to the corporate interests, including Uber and Lyft, to make them pay their fair share, and fight for big ideas like free Muni and car-free streets. One of my top priorities, if elected, is to champion a great leap forward for transit on the ballot, like we did last year, going after the revenues from the folks who have gotten the tax breaks from Mr. Trump. And under my plan, we'll generate over $300 million annually for transit, with half going to Muni infrastructure and service, $100 million to fare reduction, and $50 million for bike and pedestrian safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to be a little clippier because we have to for the questions that we have for this next round. So you got hopefully a little bit of a sense of what brought these candidates here today. I'm going to ask each question that I ask, I'm going to ask the panel to respond in a different order just to keep it lively. And each person is going to have up to 2 minutes to respond to each question. So again, I will keep an eye to the time for that. So as I think everyone in this room knows so well, for whoever is the next supervisor of District 5, there are so many priorities facing that person and so many facing the city of San Francisco. So my question to the panel is, out of all the priorities you have, where do you see transportation fitting in? And what are the top transportation issues you'd tackle first if elected? So I'm going to say we'll have Nomvula,
Sure.
Vallie, Dean, Ryan.
Actually, I wrote a response. I had a feeling that you might ask.
Great.
That question might come up today. Priority, well, let's see. So recently, SFMTA or Muni increased the prices from $2.75 to $3. The problem that I have with it is that it's 50% more from it's $3 if you're going to pay cash than if you're using a credit card. This makes it problematic because I always thought cash was king, right? So that's a problem that I believe needs to be addressed. The new trains also needs to be reconfigured to provide more seats and comfortable seats. A 50-cent surcharge is unnecessary, discriminatory, and de facto racist. The fare police are ineffective. We need to hold more hearings on how SFMTA conducts outreach and fare enforcement. The other issue I think I would like to point out is SF Bikers Coalition does amazing work, obviously. It's more green to travel by bike than to be riding in a car and spreading more pollution. So I'm for a greener San Francisco. I definitely would encourage that, definitely with less cars. And also, it's also in the interest of public safety and public health also as a big issue. So if I were elected as candidate, those are the issues that I definitely agree in San Francisco by encouraging or discouraging motorists. That's it. Yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Nomvula.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask for these questions that we hold applause so we can keep everything moving.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, Vallie, same question. Top priorities, how you see transportation fitting into your top priorities, and what would be the top issues related to transportation you'd tackle first?
Okay. Well, my top priorities, and this year has been homeless and housing, or shortage of housing, keeping people in their house, and then also transportation. And we're supposed to be a transit-first city, but we a lot of times don't act that way. And the things that I've done in the first year for homeless, I did the first vehicle and RV navigation center of the city. When I was told, and people were pushing on me at the city hall saying, we don't have a problem, I pushed forward and said, yes, we do. We are going to open one, getting it funded, getting it actually legislating it. And then what happens? The homeless count comes out. That's the highest percentage of our homeless is people living in their vehicles. So I've also done, I was a supporter of Prop C. I also did the Prop C Oversight Committee. So we can make sure we get the money to what's needed faster than anywhere else. Also housing. I actually did the Divisadero housing when I first came in because it was held up, and my opponent, Dean Preston, held it up for years. He says that he got it to the highest percentage. That is incorrect. I actually, because I had worked in housing for the last 2 years before I became supervisor, I knew how hard we could get it without killing the development. So doing that, I also pushed $40 million with my colleague Supervisor Fewer to buy existing buildings that people live in. When someone's getting LSAC, we go in and we buy it. We just bought a 7-unit over here on Schrader. We saved those people from being LSAC. It was a big deal. We also put in more money, it's $600 million housing bond coming in to do that. So please vote for that housing bond. I also transit. The first 2 weeks I got in, I actually called a hearing and said, what is going on with Muni? If we don't have reliable Muni, we cannot get people out of their Ubers. And that's the reason. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vallie. And we're going to hold applause. Thank you so much. Dean, same question.
Thank you. So, top issues for me: housing, homelessness, and transportation. I want to use this time really maybe to focus on the transportation issues, because I think in prior debates we've focused a lot on the housing issues. I think there's a few things that I'd like to do. Some are longer term, some are shorter term, and I alluded to some in my opening. The first is addressing Uber and Lyft. I'm 100% behind the Uber tax that's going to raise about over $30 million to fund transit improvements. But I think that's just the start. I think we really need to look at, we've really turned the streets over to these private companies in ways that are endangering cyclists, endangering pedestrians, slowing down Muni, and really driving everyone crazy except for the person who's sitting in the Uber at any given time. So I think we need to look at regulating them. I'm not sympathetic to the arguments that we can't. It's not true. We can enforce traffic laws against them. We can also show some leadership and go to the state level, like we had to do with the Uber tax to get state law changed. I also think we need to look at tools like geofencing that can be very effective in regulating them. With a click of a button, these companies could be kept off of certain streets and high injury areas. I mentioned doing a Muni ballot measure. I want to do basically a Prop C for Muni, like we did for homelessness last year. I think we can raise about $300 million or more through that, and also start us on a path toward fare reductions. We've had doubling of fares over the last 10 years for Muni. We need to be doing reductions and working toward free transit. I think effective public transit is a key part of safety, not just for everyone, including bicyclists and pedestrians. And finally, I think we need to realize the vision of Vision Zero in a more serious way. And that means not just long-term transformative ideas, but more specifically going in and having accountability and benchmarks, and I can talk more about that later this evening.
Thank you very much, Dean, and we will have more time to dig in. All right, so Ryan, top priorities, where do you see transportation and fitting in? What are the top transportation issues you'd tackle if elected?
My top priorities are cleanliness, safety, and affordability, and all of them call for more jobs. So in safety, not only is it in cleanliness, not only is it an environmental situation to take public transit, it also calls for the more Muni drivers, because there's a labor shortage in Muni, and I would agree with Vallie that the pay for a Muni driver should be higher than $22.70 per hour, because it's still not affordable here in District 5. So the increase of that price would create more jobs. The Munis wouldn't be so filled all the time, and maybe all of us could make it here on time, and there'd be less delays. When it comes to affordability, taking Muni, BART, all the public transportation you can, all goes into helping everybody in District 5 becoming more affordable. When you have to pay for Uber, which is, I don't know, $10 for about like 5 miles or 10 miles, it's not going to be affordable. So the creation of jobs in in these public transportation areas all tie into helping San Francisco become more cleaner, more safer, because you don't have as many cars on the roads navigating, and more affordable for everybody to share public transportation.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. All right, so speaking of Muni, it is clearly a big topic in the room tonight. Quick poll, who here rides Muni like at least once a week? Fantastic, so let's talk about Muni. So the question for the candidates is, what do you see as the top priority for Muni right now? And what would you do if elected to aggressively support the city's transit first policy? Yeah, that's come up a few times, it's in our charter. So for this one, I'm going to say we'll have Dean, Nomvula, Ryan, Vallie. Great, so Dean, the question one more time. What do you see as the top priority for Muni? And if elected, what would you do to aggressively support the transit first policy?
Yeah, so I think we all are clear on how bad things are. I just want to say we have 55% on time for Muni right now, 45% for the NJUDA and some of the other lines through the district. And that only tells the beginning of the story, because if you're an everyday Muni rider, you know that you can't even get on half of those vehicles that come because our system's overburdened. So we've pursued and started to pursue an approach on development, which is about growth for the city. I'm all for growing the city, but you can't just build stuff, move people in, and then deal with transit later. And that's the city's current approach, is to try to greenlight as much development as possible without actually investing in our transit infrastructure. So I can't reiterate enough, like, we cannot be an Uber first city, right? We have privatized and deregulated our streets to the detriment of public transit. And so one of the reasons that I am pushing forward for November 2020 to do a big ballot measure that is focused on transit, to be a supervisor that leads the fight to make sure that a big transportation measure is the next one in line, and that we do that in November 2020, is so that we have the resources we need to invest in the Muni infrastructure, to invest in operator salaries, as I mentioned, to reduce fares, and also to use those funds for pedestrian and bicycle safety. So I think it's has to be a top priority for our city, and we can do that through a ballot measure, as I mentioned. But ultimately, we have got to recognize that our public transit system is failing, and also that there is no path to an environmentally sustainable city that grows, that does not involve major investment in our Muni infrastructure. And for me, that's one of the top priorities. And by the way, come visit me at a Muni stop. I'm at Muni stops almost every morning. I've seen half of you in this room out at Muni stops. We'd love to see you out there.
Thank you so much, Dean. Nomvula.
Yeah. I think I would agree with some of the points that Dean has highlighted, particularly on creating.
Great, and thank you, everybody. Shake it off. We're back. Nomvula.
So I'll start over. I'd say that I am in agreement with some of the points that Dean has had to make, particularly in creating a ballot measure in 2020 that would create a more effective transit system. Our public transit system has failed. I agree. I use it almost daily when I'm not driving. Actually, most of the time when I do use my cards to drive out of the city. And then I do a lot of walking with my son because Faye's French American is just down the street. So I do believe in a cleaner city. We both have bikes. So the only thing I wanted to say about the bike thing, for children and families, it's not necessarily safe. And I don't know whether the Bikers Coalition can actually do something about it. But when you live on Haight on the Hill where I live, going downhill, it's almost impossible for me to think that I could actually bike with my child to school. So we prefer to walk. Anyway, back to the Muni system. What I have experienced is that in peak hours in the city, you always miss the bus. So it doesn't matter for me, we can walk. I don't have that pressure where, it's easy, it takes us a 10, 12-minute walk to school. But for other people who are getting to work at 9 to 5, I don't work 9 to 5 jobs. So they have to get there, and half the time the buses just go past you. on Hayden Buchanan. It's a real serious problem, and they pack to capacity. So, if I'm open to suggestion about what improvements can be made. Either more buses should be available. Same thing, for instance, with City College and 43 Masonic. It's the same thing going in the morning. And you're not even sure going on those hills and the way they turn, whether the bus might overturn. That's a big safety concern for me, not just as a parent, as a resident, as someone who lives in San Francisco. So the other factor is these techie buses, for instance, that go to Google.
Unfortunately, that's our
Very
time.
quick. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, Ryan.
Okay, so I forgot to mention that I am a daily skater and a daily BART and Muni rider. So the two priorities I have for Muni are the way it operates and the labor shortage and the not enough buses being able to take everybody. So the way it operates right now is an old-fashioned way. It's slow, there's lots of delays, and it's always crowded. And even SF Transit is exploring the automated system that Muni can definitely afford. Muni is it's a well-funded public transportation organization. It makes a lot of money, and I think that they can make that transition to an automated system where buses aren't always delayed and they could keep on moving without stopping all the time. Secondly, the labor shortage, again, I think increasing the pay of drivers who drive full-time and they're putting their bodies on the line, it should be at least $23, if not more, for a driver to drive all day. I think that would incentivize more people to come in and drive for Muni. There's more buses, so during rush hour, there's going to be more buses, less crowded Munis to take people, and with the less crowded Munis, actually, it would address her point of the safety concerns that a bus might tip over on a hilly road, or something equivalent to that manner. So that's what I'd say. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ryan and Vallie.
Yes, thank you. This is the thing. When I first got in office, we had what now is called Muni meltdown in the summer. I was at the Judah over here on Carl and Cole. There was no bus. No, and I sat and I watched one person after another getting an Uber. If we do not have reliable Muni, we're not going to solve the Uber problem. And I just have to say one thing. The Uber is regulated by the state. It's not regulated by the city. So any major policy has to come from the state, not the city. Can we do a tax? Absolutely. But that would be passed on to everybody else, all of you, anyone that would take an Uber. So we have to make Muni reliable. Do you know every day we have a shortage of drivers, 400. 400 a day, we have a shortage. So we have spent millions of dollars on these new buses and trains, but there's no one to drive them. Or there's a lack of people to drive them. There is no way this Muni system can be successful unless drivers come to work, unless we're able to keep drivers. We train drivers right now, and guess what? When they get finished with training, they go to other cities where they make better money. So this was the hearing I had. This all came out with the analyst report. And so I have been rattling the chains that you need to pay the Muni drivers more money. There are first responders in a lot of ways. They see the most social ills of the city, and we don't even pay them enough to qualify for affordable housing here. Is this right? Absolutely no. In May, they got a new contract. They're very happy. Now they'll be able to afford and qualify for affordable housing. And thank you. So you got to do reliability first.
Thank you very much, Vallie. All right, so next, great. Applause for the panel. And I'm going to keep this moving because we have more questions. We have more things to talk about. So next question, as no doubt many people in this room know, Mayor London Breed served as District 5 Supervisor for 5.5 years before she served as our city's mayor. So my question for the panel is, how would you rate the mayor's performance on bicycle issues and street safety issues, both during her time as supervisor and now as mayor? So it's specifically about bicycle and street safety issues during her time as supervisor and now as mayor. What policies or approaches would you continue? What would you do differently? The order I'm going to have for this question, we're going to have Ryan, Vallie, Dean, and then you're next. Great. Thank you. My brain broke. Sorry. All right, Ryan.
So I'd rate Mayor London Breed a 6 on the street issues and bicycle safety issues. Partially because if you look at the stats just this year, in May, there are 19 fatalities by either bike, pedestrian, or driver in San Francisco. And I don't think that's not even a step close to, that's actually higher than last year. And we're going in the wrong direction from Vision Zero. And part of that is because we don't have the right infrastructure for drivers. We need more. And the only thing that's being done is the addition of bike lanes, which I would continue. But that's it for London Breed. I think during her time as supervisor, she came out and she acted like she's a part of this community. But then like eventually she kind of faded away into the mayor's office and then started handling different issues than the street safety and bicycle issues. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Vallie? Okay, we're gonna hold applause on this question. Thank you, everyone.
So my rating of Mayor Breed, I think when she was a supervisor, because I worked for her for a while, I would rate her as a 5. I think she had a very large learning curve, especially with bike safety, but we did push things through like Masonic and a lot of the protected lanes, bike lane on Fell Street. So as a mayor though, I see her growing. Is it going to take maybe longer? Absolutely. But I see her coming out and saying we need protected bike lanes and saying that we want to do 20 miles. I mean, we've never heard that from a mayor before. I definitely do not want to be the kind of supervisor, or I'm hoping the mayor that just responds to when we have tragedies. That's not what we need to do. We really need to rethink how we look at cars in this city and reverse that mentality of how this city has been designed. Like most cities in this country, they were designed to make cars a priority. We need to be able to make bikes and pedestrians a priority, because no matter if you drive, you take Muni, or you ride a bike, you're a pedestrian at some point. And so one of the things that we've done at the Board of Supervisors is we did a resolution saying that the MTA board needs to move forward on all zero vision projects. Just do it. When I became supervisor, I took the money that I had from the MTA board, which were transit authority commissioners, and I put it on all these different projects to make it safer for pedestrians and bicycles. I feel it's so important. If you're safe on a bicycle or if you're safe as a pedestrian, you'll be fine in a car. I really feel that. You're gonna be fine in a car. So I'm hoping, I have big plans and I have big support for the mayor that she's gonna do the right thing.
Thank you very much, Vallie. Dean?
Well, I'm curious if the 5 rating from the supervisor was that out of 10?
Yes, it was out of 10, Dean.
So it sounds like her former legislative aide just gave her a failing grade.
Isn't that a C?
But,
All right, let's bring it back to Dean.
I'll say this, I'll refrain from scoring her. I will say that it was clear transportation was not a top priority issue for London Breed as a supervisor of this district. There were different advocacy groups, including transit riders, did their 22-day challenge, asking supervisors to ride Muni for 22 days. She was one of a few supervisors that did not fail that challenge and wouldn't ride Muni regularly. I ran against her. It's no secret I was not happy with her record, and her transportation record was part of my decision to do that in 2016. She voted against the transit impact, increasing the transit impact development fee, which I think has, was stagnant for years and is a key source of money, particularly for Muni. And I think she allowed Octavia and really the heart of our transit system in the district down in Octavia to become a bit of a mess. And didn't respond to the rise of traffic in that area in ways that would have been, I think, fairly easy to deal with. I do think fundamentally, and I don't want to harp on the Uber and Lyft stuff incessantly, but I need to, because I think that what our District 5 Supervisor's Office has been lacking is a willingness to stand up to corporate interests. And I think Uber, in its SEC filings, specifically says their goal is to get people off public transportation and into private vehicles. That's what we're up against. And I don't think the solution is just to improve Muni, as the supervisor says. We have to go directly at that. We can't just throw up our hands. We have to challenge them. I don't think our District 5 Supervisor's Office has been doing that.
Thank you, Jean. Nomvula.
Yeah, I myself, actually, it's almost as if Dean read my thoughts. I'm going to refrain from grading Mayor Breed, who I also know personally, and I have a great deal of respect for her as an African American woman, just even having the courage to go as far as she did. To me, it's an inspiration as a black woman, and she did a lot in that way to inspire our community. I was one of the people who actually did support her when she ran for supervisor, so I'm still very proud of her. Of course, I understand in this debate that her achievements in terms of transit, public transit system hasn't been that great, but anybody could use room for improvement. I did, however, read, and I am in agreement with the SFBC Coalition was proposing the idea of having that Octavia corridor be more bike-friendly zone, and I completely agree with that. Actually, that particular area is an entire mess. I mean, I know from driving to get to the freeway, going down Haight, making that right to Octavia, it's a huge mess. It needs some kind of improvement, and it could do with being more green. So, I'm sure London is advised by a large number of supervisors in terms of what they think. She can work and improve, step her game up. There's nothing wrong with that, and give her a break too.
Great,
All right.
thank you very much, Nomvula.
You're
All right, sure, now for the whole panel, yes? I appreciate the excitement in this audience and the desire to applaud. All right, so I have one more sort of long form question, and then we're gonna do a lightning round. So, Vision Zero has come up several times already in this conversation, and on the one hand, it can be hard to find a candidate who, at least on paper, doesn't support Vision Zero, right? The city's plan to eliminate all traffic deaths and severe fatalities over a 10-year period. However, as has also been pointed out, 2019 has been one of the deadliest years on record when it comes to traffic fatalities in San Francisco, and it's only July. So my question to the panel is, what do you think are the barriers to urgently address this epidemic of traffic crashes? And what would you do if elected to overcome those barriers? So for this question, I'm going to say we do Vallie, Nomvula, Dean, and Ryan. So the question again, what do you think are the barriers to urgently address the epidemic of traffic crashes that we're experiencing this year in San Francisco, and based on our history? And what would you do if elected to overcome those barriers?
Well, as a supervisor, I think Vision Zero, we all agree we should do Vision Zero and put that in, implement it. But it means daylighting, and everybody knows that means removing a parking spot. I did that on Divisadero. We have to daylight Divisadero. If anybody's ever been trying to cross the street on Divisadero when someone's making a left-hand turn and you're maybe on Fulton or something, it's really scary because people go really fast to try to get across a two-lane street. I think we should be looking at, having left turn signals. I think that way we could actually help with pedestrians getting hit when they're in the traffic. Also looking at a lot of the intersections that are high incident, not having right turns on red lights. That's another thing. But really daylighting is something I think is really important, because if you can't see that person or child step off of a curb when they're going into a crosswalk, and I think all of us have had this experience where you look the driver in the face as you're stepping off and moving, this is really a problem. But for me, as I always go out to the community and say, we need to do this, and I talk to the community. I know I have people that disagree. They don't want to lose their parking space. But when we talk about the safety issues about this, and when we talk about, even if you don't ride a bike, you and your family are pedestrians. It's something that we need to do. And it needs to move faster. And we get frustrated because you have to understand, we cannot tell the MTA board what to do. That's not something that we do. We take our money, we put it into safety projects, the money we get every year as commissioners on the TA, but we need to make sure MTA moves a lot faster. As a supervisor, you have to be able to go out to your community and say, this is what we're going to do. So,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Thank you. Nomvula?
Hi, okay, so I'm one for, I don't believe in a top-down approach. It's not within my purview, for lack of a better word. I believe that to have an informed perspective, or to make in order to have a democracy, you have to make educated decisions. So therefore, dealing with the community at grassroots level, the coalitions, the people that represent your residents are key in having more informed decisions about how you're going to legislate or zone certain areas. So in order to be effective in terms of fatalities that occur, that communication has to be diverse and pragmatic, and has to take place. It has to be engaging, a dialogue that is constructive and engaging. The second point I want to bring up in terms of fatalities is actually the Bikers Coalition brings up some very good points. It's very helpful for many residents of San Francisco. I know that you have a 10,000 plus membership, but I really enjoy that on your website. The key things that you make people aware of is to obey posted signs, ride at safe speeds, yield to pedestrians, ride single file and keep right unless passing, ring your bell or call out to your left when passing others. Those things seem very basic because we take tests and go to the DMV to pass a driver's test, but I think it's a time now that we actually took the laws for bicycling very seriously and implement them in our own daily lives as bikers, but also as pedestrians, to have a better understanding. And that way you create more awareness, because when you have more awareness, you're less privy to create a fertility, because you're informed of what your rights are, know where the signs are posted, etc.
Thank you very much, Nomvula.
You're welcome.
Dean?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest barriers is just lack of benchmarks and accountability in Vision Zero. And I think most folks in City Hall are good folks and share the goals of trying to not have people dying on our streets. It's just a question of how you get there. I mean, if you haven't already, I would highly recommend everyone read the March 14th letter from, I think, all the sponsoring organizations of this debate. Wrote a letter to officials at City Hall laying out really clearly what it's going to take and what's missing from actually achieving Vision Zero. Now, it's a 10-year plan, and we're 5 years in, right? And we're nowhere near actually reaching that. So there needs to be an urgency to moving forward with things that are going to protect folks from fatalities and serious injuries on our streets. I think there's things we can do immediately. I want to highlight one. It seems really obvious, but the speed of a vehicle is something that's very easy to control. Reducing speeds is probably the number one thing you could do that would actually reduce pedestrian and biker deaths in San Francisco. We know where the corridors are, right? 75% of the injuries happen in I think 13% of the roads. I mean, we know, and the advocates certainly know where these injuries are occurring. There are other things we can do, certainly banning right turn on red, like some other cities have done in some or all locations. I think we need to look at some of the high injury corridors at having crossing guards, particularly because disproportionately seniors and people with disabilities are the victims. And so I think we need, especially near senior centers where we continue to have a lot of accidents, we should have crossing guards. We need to move forward with protected intersections. I also think, and this got a lot of press a few years ago, but has not been talked about as much, we need to focus our enforcement efforts on the focus on the five, which are the
That's
five
our
leading.
turn. Thank you very much, Dean.
All right.
Ryan?
Yep.
So my improvement program for infrastructure, Dean mentions that he wants to improve basically the intersections near senior centers. But for me, it's gotta be hilly streets. It's gotta be near schools, near parks, because all across those areas are people crossing streets all the time. And the example I always use is near Alamo Square, where sometimes there's no pedestrian timers that show you when you can walk. There's no speed limit signs, especially when you're going down. I think there should be a speed limit sign about like half a mile before you really reach that intersection, so that you have the time to slow down to stop before that line. And before schools, even in Alamo Square, there's Ida Wells High School there, and with no stop signs or even the pedestrian timers, I couldn't imagine a high schooler high schoolers running across the street and being another fatality in that count, and the 19 fatalities this year. And I wouldn't want that to happen. So my policies would spread all across those areas: parks, senior centers, high schools, schools in generals, and even preschools if that's an issue.
Great, thank you very much, Ryan. All right, so before we get to audience questions, we're going to do a few very short lightning round questions with our panel. I have 4 of them, so everybody will get to answer. When I say lightning round, I mean sometimes it's one word, sometimes it's just one sentence, so it's quick. We're going to go down, everybody's going to get a chance to answer first, everybody's going to get a chance to answer every question. We're just going to go down the line. So my first question is, what's your favorite street in District 5?
Ooh.
Away we go.
Well, hate, obviously.
Okay, great.
I'm saying Masonic right now because it looks like a Paris boulevard.
Ryan?
I do love the hate.
Yay.
Tough one. I gotta say Deviz. Visadero has always been my
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good ones to choose from. All right, great. So next question, if you could wave a magic wand and fix one street in District 5, which would you choose? We're going to go down the other way this time, so Dean.
This should be fun.
Bell, next to that Arco station, is a fatality waiting to happen. We need to fix that.
Thank you, Dean. Ryan.
I was just gonna say that street. Yeah, I would support that too. Yeah, if I had a magic wand.
Vallie?
Page Street between Buchanan and Market.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nomvula?
Can I do more than one?
No one.
Okay,
Fix all the
so,
streets.
okay, how about Oak between, okay, so Oak Street coming down when you get to turn the freeway, I think that would be, it's really confused, Oak and Golf, I think, yeah, it's a little shaky. There's that whole grid around there.
I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Yep. Totally. And I hear a lot of
Super
people
busy in the mornings.
for all of these streets too, right? These are people who know their neighborhood. All right. So I've got 2 more lightning round questions. Vallie, you're going to start this one. We'll go around. What bike do you ride?
I have a public bike. It's my 4th bike in 3 years because I've had them stolen.
Ryan?
I rode a white BMX bike.
So I ride it's a Bianchi touring bike from forever ago. I had something more recent that was a Jameis that Remy from Mojo. It was his bike that he then sold me, but that got stolen.
So sorry to hear that, Nomvula.
Mine is a public Dutch style bike, which is very similar to the ones in Amsterdam. I like the design, the Dutch style, because it's gender free or whatever, and very comfortable. I've had it for 7 years. I park it in my house, so it's never been stolen.
All right, we love that. All right, and then last lightning round question. If you had to describe District 5 in one word, what would it be, Ryan?
Wholesome.
Wholesome.
Diverse.
Diverse.
Colorful.
Colorful.
It's hard in one word. It's here, right here, District 5 is here. One word, my heart.
Wonderful. All right, so let's have a round of applause for our panel. All right, so I am excited to have now some questions for the audience. So thank you from the audience, not for the audience. So thank you to everybody who has submitted a question. Charles has collected those, and we're going to still keep this pretty quick. I think to keep to time, we're going to have just 1 minute to respond to each question so that we can make sure that everybody gets a chance to respond. Yeah? So my first question is, how are you thinking about new mobility modes? And when I say that, I'm talking about bike share, scooters, etc. So we had some different questions around that. How are you thinking about new mobility modes? In 1 minute, we're going to go down the line this way. Dean.
So I think number of things. I mean, I'm happy to see the rise of bike share and electric biking, which I think has opened up e-bikes for a lot of folks who otherwise hadn't used them. I think with scooters, we got some issues we need to work out, particularly given the speeds they can attain of how we're sharing bike lanes, especially if bike lanes continue to be as narrow as they are. So I think, you know, as with, I think the key is how we're gonna, how we're gonna regulate some of these and making sure that they're actually not interfering with other modes of transportation. So I think there's exciting things that are going on, but I'm concerned sometimes that one mode of transportation can interfere with another.
Great, thank you, Dean. Ryan, how are you thinking about new mobility modes?
So I'm interested in bike share, and the way I would do it is there's already a lot of bike share in District 3 and the Mission area. I would start moving west toward the Panhandle and Haight areas, and obviously discussing where each one is placed, because it seems that everybody doesn't want it in their parking lot. So discussion is very important. When it comes to the new electric scooters and bikes, I'm for them, but the thing is, when they're littered in front of people's houses or in front of people's apartments, it becomes an issue. And I would consider thinking about making electric scooters that are just tossed on the ground. I would consider it as littering.
Thank you, Ryan. Vallie?
Yes. When I first came into office, we didn't have as many bike shares as we should have. And one of the things I had said to the bike share companies is you need to go out and you need to outreach to communities, because we need bike shares. It's real, and the reason, one of the things that we needed to do is we needed to educate community of why we need 2 or 3 bike pods in a certain neighborhood. Because if you go to one and it's empty, you're not going to walk 6 blocks for another one. So to be successful, we needed, to have more in a neighborhood. One of the things I said is to the neighborhood, if you don't like the area where the bike share pod is going to be, find another location. But we are going to have this. I mean, if my bike got stolen again, I wouldn't buy another one. I would just do bike share. One of the other things I asked them to do is really start promoting electric bikes. When you're a senior and you haven't been able to ride because of your knee or your hip, this is the way to ride, electric bikes. As far as the scooters, we have issues with them, and we have to deal with them. Yes.
Thank you very much. And Nomvula.
Well, I'm going to be very honest. I'm not a big, huge proponent of bike share because I felt like it took away a lot of parking in the neighborhoods. Like I live in the Lower Hayden, so it's problematic. I think that if we promoted the idea that people have some bike ownership, it's kind of, you have to create a sort of momentum. Ownership is good. Maybe create pods where people can safely park their bikes. Maybe better policing for their bikes. I still am kind of trying to figure out. I don't know about these. What do you call them? The scooters or whatever. They're a little bit annoying. I think biking is a healthier way for a community. I've seen it in European countries where it's not enforced, but it definitely has a lot more support. Far less fatalities, definitely more green, and I think that's the future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, great. We're gonna hold applause on this because I want to get through a few more questions in our remaining time. So my next question, we also got a lot of questions about Muni. So what can be done to fund Muni rather than further fare increases, right? So that's one source of funding for Muni. Sure. I didn't write it, you wrote it. So the question is, what can be done to fund Muni rather than further fare increases? We're going to start with Nomvula, go down the line this way. Nomvula.
So, okay, so, let me, a quick question, I'm gonna answer that with a question. So, Vallie, you were saying earlier, so is, who's in charge of the MTA or Muni? Is it state funded or city?
Well, it's both. We get state funding and we get city funding, but MTA is all of their commission is appointed by the mayor.
Okay.
The board does not appoint.
Okay, so it's not the board. So, two things I see particularly flawed with Muni, and I appreciate the example that you gave that as soon as you train the drivers, they move elsewhere. Well, I think part of the problem is, I don't know where Ryan got the rates from at 22. That's not a livable wage in San Francisco. I'm sorry. If I was a bus driver and I was trained and then they told me 25, that ain't gonna cut it.
That's why I said increase it.
Well, yeah, that's part of the incentive. You have to pay your drivers better, just as much as you have to pay your teachers better, just as much as you have to pay your firemen and all the people that live in San Francisco, that take care of this community, not just District 5, but all the district. You have to pay your civil servants better money so that they can look after their families.
And that's our time.
Thank you. Sure.
Great. So, Vallie, same question. What can be done to fund Muni rather than further fare increases?
Well, you know, when I worked in affordable housing for the last couple of years, there is development fees in a lot of these housing projects, and especially if they're larger housing developments. There's fees within that. And we need to make sure we get the right fees there. I don't want to slow up housing, but we need to have the fees there. We also need a state transit bond. We absolutely need a big state transit bond because we need more money. Do I want to raise the fares, or do I want to see the fares of Muni be raised? No. I think that is not the way to go. But Muni always needs money because everything is so expensive. So looking at a state bond is something that I think is really important. Have we looked at it for citywide money? Absolutely, and we're still looking at that. I think it should be in capital planning. I think the capital planning should have an item line budget for transit, and that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian?
Well, compared to many other subway systems in LA and New York, Muni is a decently funded public transportation organization. If you look at the website, there's a chart that shows you the money going in and the money going out. And the money going out is basically the buses and the fares, or not the fares, the payment for the drivers. And they have enough money to not raise the fares for another good 2 years. They could continue to keep on operating Muni and still increase the pay of drivers and continue to operate Muni for another 2 years while increasing pay for drivers. So I don't think that Muni, there needs to be another tax or a raise in fares to help fund Muni. Muni is a decently funded organization.
Thank you, Ryan. Dean, same question.
Yeah, I think it's unconscionable that you know, at this time where corporate interests are doing so fabulously and getting giveaways left and right, and they are relying on our public transit system, that we're raising fares on riders instead of getting the money from them. I think it's an issue of affordability of public transit, it's an issue of equity, and it needs to be a top priority. I think we need to change our thinking around who pays for Muni. I don't think that that we should be paying for Muni through what we used to call the fare box, which is outdated now. It's now, you know, online side. But it's the same idea. You know, people who are riding public transit are doing a service to this city. People who are riding public transit are saving our environment. Transportation is the leading cause of air pollution nationally. Right? You're doing your civic duty and you should be rewarded for that. So that's why I'm proposing going to the ballot, as I mentioned. There's about $200 million worth of fares. There's absolutely no reason we cannot tax the biggest corporations that are doing just fine. They'll still be making more than they were before Trump and make Muni free. The only thing is, we've got to reduce fares first, because if we go free Muni, it'll be overwhelmed the system. So we have to phase in free Muni and start with the reduction.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next one. All right, so my next question is, what can be, and again, this is a question from the audience, what can be done about all of the double parking and deliveries blocking the bike lane? What can be done? So, we're going to take this one, Brian, then Dean, then come down this way. Yes, I will read the question one more time. Everyone will have a minute to respond. The question is, what can be done? Thank you so much. Thank you. The question is, what can be done about all of the double parking and deliveries blocking the bike lane?
I think there has to be improvement in policing, and I have the best policing recruitment initiative by working with the police department of San Francisco. With more police officers, you have more patrolling throughout District 5 to catch the people who are double parking, to catch the people who are just stopping for a little while, that's what they say, and then staying there for 30 minutes without any penalty. So the improvement in policing will ultimately eventually help everybody with parking, because someone double parking and taking your space is a terrible thing. When I was driving, and this one person always did it, and then I ended up calling the police on him, and then he was fined eventually, and he never did it again. So I think policing is the way to go. Improvement in policing is the way to go.
Thank you. That's our time, Dean.
Yeah, let's enforce our traffic laws. There's a novel idea, and it's fascinating to me. You know, this defeatism around regulating the TNCs, the Uber and Lyft, like that we'd have to go to the state. We can enforce our own traffic laws. Their entire business model is premised on violating the laws of this city by picking up and dropping off people in bike lanes. Right? They don't go to a designated spot. They don't parallel park to meet their whole business model is parking in bike lanes, right? Let's be real. So let's get out there and ticket the hell out of them to bring them to their knees at City Hall, and we can work out some reasonable regulation. But if we're, you know, it's not you guys double parking. That's the problem. It's a business model of up to 50,000 vehicles out there stopping in bike lanes. And until we address that, we are not going to have people safe. My kids, when we're in a bike lane, that's the number one fear, is getting doored or having some vehicle pulling in front of you.
Thank you very much, Nomvula.
Well, as you know, when you have Uber or Lyft or even just some random, not a commuter, but a driver just being on the bike lane, it's obviously, they should be cited. It should be an infraction and people need to be made aware, whether it's Uber or whatever, that if you're going to block a bike lane, this is the fine that you're going to have to pay. And I'm serious, it should definitely be enforced, because it's likely it leads to the unsafety for me, my community, my children, etc. So there should be stricter, bolder fines with regards to that. It shouldn't happen, but obviously people are going to take their chances.
Thank you, Nomvula. Vallie?
Yes, enforcement is really important. We've, this last budget season, we put in money for enforcement, traffic enforcement. And double parking is a big one, and especially if you're walking, trying to get around, it's horrible. But also, we're also looking at, and MTA is working out, developing curb management. It's archaic. You look in corridors and the yellow zones are not big enough for trucks to go in to deliver at stores and bars and restaurants or whatever they're delivering. We need to rechange that. We have to also look at if people are dropping people off, where do they go? So MTA is actually looking at completely redoing curb management, which I think is really important. In the Inner Sunset, we're gonna start doing this, and we're gonna start in probably a few months, and we've been talking to the merchants, and we've been talking to the residents about complete curb management. And
Thank
also,
you. That's our time.
there we go.
Thank
Sorry.
you very much. All right, that's all right. We have time for one final quick question for everyone, and then we'll hear closing statements from the candidates. So again, this is going to be more in our lightning round style, but we want to hear from everybody on the panel. How do you get to work? So, starting with Nomvula, then Ryan, Dean, Vallie.
Well, before I get to work, I usually walk my kid to school first. And like I said, I don't do 9 to 5, so I work as a film producer, so I usually work as an independent. And then when I do work for anybody, I work at concerts bartending for people. So I have a lot of my free time because my work is independently produced, and then I sell it to somebody. So
just how do you get to work? Sorry, we gotta be quick on this one.
I walk or I work from home.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much. That's right. No, we're not doing 2 minutes on this one.
No.
So, sorry, we don't have time. Sorry for not being clear about this. Yes, we're just gonna do a quick round on this, and then everyone will have 2 minutes for their closing remarks.
Should I start over again?
No, sorry, no. Thank you very much. All right, I think I said Ryan, yes, then Dean, okay.
So today I walked and I skateboarded to Civic Center BART station. I took the BART to Balboa Park and back to Civic, and then I took the Muni all the way here to this debate. So that's how I commute.
Thank you, Ryan. Dean?
Muni.
Quick answer, thank you, Vallie.
I do it all. I bike, I take Muni, and if I have time, I walk, because it actually walking through all the parks as I'm going to work, it's a stress releaser because I get to pet the dogs as I'm going through. So I do it all.
Wonderful. All right, so thank you. So we're going to hear now closing statements from our candidates. These are going to be 2 minutes each.
Sure.
I will make sure we keep to time. The order for the closing statements is Dean, Nomvula, Ryan, and then Vallie. So thank you. We will hold our applause until we hear from all 4 of our candidates, and then we will applaud all of them. So thank you in advance, audience. All right, take it away, Dean.
All right, well, thank you everyone for being here. And you know, my campaign's about rethinking what's possible in the city. When it comes to transportation for San Francisco, here's the future I see. Imagine a Muni system on which you can get on and get anywhere in the city you're going in 30 minutes or less. It's free. You're on a bus or train that's not overcrowded, and it's being driven by an operator who can actually afford to live in San Francisco. Imagine a network of car-free streets, protected bikeways, and protected intersections where everyone, including kids and seniors and folks with disabilities, can walk or bike without fear of serious injury or death, and Vision Zero is a reality. And imagine our city growing, but free of congestion, because we've actually made public transit, walking, and biking so appealing. And because we took action to limit cars with congestion pricing, geofencing of TNCs, and comprehensive planning that prioritizes safety in our environment. That's the vision. I'm an advocate like you. I want you to know that I will be not just a good vote on these issues on the Board of Supervisors, but I hope to be your voice on the board to do everything possible to make this vision a reality. As we did with Prop C and Prop F last year, we will do the hard work we need to do for transformative change. And in this wealthy city, in the midst of a climate crisis, we need to take a great leap forward when it comes to transportation. I'm proud to be endorsed by many leaders and organizations that transit advocates have worked with, including the Sierra Club, Milk Club, Tenants Union, the DSA, Jane Kim, Matt Gonzalez, Mark Leno, Tom Amiano, Christina Olagi, Supervisors Haney, Ronan, Marr, Peskin, and Mandelman. And I look forward to working with these leaders and all of you
Thank
to
you,
take the
that's
bold
okay.
steps we need to do for our city.
Thank you very much, Dean. We're going to hold our applause. Thank you very much, audience. We're turning it over to Nomvula.
Yeah, well, I wanted to thank the SFBC Coalition for having held this forum, and I think that your organization does fantastic work, but there's still room for improvement. And as attested by your website, I think the ideas are there, and they just need to be better implemented by greater participation, not just of District 5, but the greater part of San Francisco. Of course, the transit system needs to be improved with Muni, and I believe that is possible. As I said, in order to have a democracy, in order to have improvement, you must make educated decisions. It's only when people are informed, then you can have a democracy, because people have to make those smart decisions. And that's on any level, whether it's the transit system, whether it's the housing system, whether it's the unfairness of people, or like, for instance, one example, 100,000 units in the city that exist that are completely empty, owned by investors. And so what are we doing, what is City Hall doing about, like, how can you have 100,000 existing condos and we have a serious crisis with housing? So those are the many issues which I will tackle if I'm appointed as a supervisor. But the issues are broad, and I think there is the great possibility for change in the city now more than ever.
Thank you very much,
You're
Nomvula.
welcome.
And Ryan.
So thank you for listening to me today. I see this as a time where it can be a transition to a transit-first city. My points, reiterating on the points I made about Muni, we need to change the way it operates to stop delays. We need to increase the pay of Muni drivers, and doing that will only influence more people to transition from driving from taking Uber to taking these public transportation options like BART and Muni. And about my improvement program, if you support the improvement in bike safety and pedestrian safety, you're going to need my improvement program, which puts up the necessary signs for drivers to know what's approaching, what's coming up before the hill, for children or in schools, senior centers, parks, you name it. There needs to be pedestrian tickers, timers, and enough stop signs, because those, it's only a one-time thing. You put up a sign, it's going to be there for 20 years. It only takes one candidate to say, oh, I'm going to do all these infrastructure improvements. I'm going to promise it, and it's going to be there for another 20 plus years. So if the points I made resonated with you, and you're looking for someone who's young and experienced, my name is Ryan Lanham, and I'm for a clean and safer San Francisco.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And Vallie.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, look, before I was a supervisor, legislative aide, and then working in affordable housing, I was a neighborhood activist. And I'm still that mindset as a neighborhood activist. I feel it's so important that we listen to the community. And I'm also someone that gets things done. I have passed 15 pieces of legislative pieces at the board unanimously. I am actually someone at City Hall that will work with anybody, even if they disagree with me. I sit down and I work with them, whether that's at City Hall or our state representatives, because you cannot get things done if you're decisive. You have to be willing to sit down and say, let's talk, let's come together. This is what the community needs. And I'm willing to do that, to make sure that my district and this city gets what they need and what they want. And when I make decisions, I go to the community first. I go to the community and I ask, what do you want? Whether it's Midtown, I'm working with Midtown and their needs and what they're looking at. And I'm working for affordable housing and homeless. But I also have to say to the community, what is on your mind? It's not a one issue when you're a supervisor. So many things come at you, whether it's they're taking down trees, we want sidewalk gardens, we need public safety, we have trash in front of our house. There's so many things, and you have to be ready, and you have to be able, to say, I know how to do this. I'm the person that knows how to get things done. And it's so important. I'm telling you, if you have a supervisor that's not ready to do that, this district will not get what it needs. And that's me. And I say, please, I thank everyone for being here tonight, because I know you're all busy people, and to come in and to listen to us and for us to listen to you, I really appreciate it. And thank you for all of the sponsors and co-sponsors.
This is the conclusion of the formal part of our evening. I believe some of the candidates may be able to stay a bit to meet with you, but some of them may need to go. Thank you all for coming with us. Have a great night.